Good thing that Stephen King will never find out what an unknown name from YouTube thinks about the book he wrote 20 years ago. Moin moin, dear people, old, new, my friends, the friends of my friends, my relatives, and anyone in the world who found this channel and who thought that the topics I'm talking about might be interesting for them. My name is Anna of Northern Germany, a survivor, a fighter, a writer. On this channel, generally, I talk about writing because I'm an aspiring author, about books, about mental health awareness, all this together, times about politics, because I am an exiled Russian. Thank you to everyone who watched my previous video. I think it was very depressive, although I really tried it not to sound that depressive, but yeah, I guess I reached some kind of dopamine bottom. A person close to me died, and also I had my birthday, and it also turned out to be quite dramatic. For example, finally I managed to ask my father if my childhood cat died, which is, the answer is yes. My cat died, and also I'm processing and I'm getting through the process of grieving because I really love animals. But okay, whatever. We're not going to talk about anything sad today. Maybe it's even going to be fun because today I have this book on offer to you, to all my authors, aspiring authors, any kind of writers who maybe already write, who have blogs or don't have any blogs, or are thinking about starting, who are scared, for example, or maybe they have already started and they don't know how to go further, and they are seeking some kind of coaching, some kind of advice. And where would you get such advice? Of course, from a professional author, a person who has written a bundle of bestsellers, a person who has been in the profession, if we can say so, in the profession of writing for years and years and years, when many of us weren't even born yet. He was already in the profession. And of course, many people would be attracted by this book. How I got the recommendation about this book? Actually, I have known about it long ago. When I was a teenager, I used to be a Stephen King's fan, and at some point even dreamt of being like the second Stephen King who writes horror stories. But you don't need to be the second anyone, just be yourself. And also, again, I had already said that in my channel, I think that life is scary enough. So you don't have to bring extra horror with the books. And a woman from my writing group, which is on a hold right now, it's very sad. It's very sad. It's not my fault. It's our library's fault, but okay. She said that she found advice written in this book very valuable, and I decided that I should put my fingers into this creation, this literary piece. So let's find out if Stephen King can actually teach us writing. And yeah, that's funny. Probably you will just say, yeah, this book is ancient and everybody has said something about it, but I haven't said anything yet. And by the way, I checked the prices on this book, and they are not cheap. They are not cheap. They're not cheap at all. You would have expected this old book to be maybe cheaper, but it is published and republished several times. It's not cheap. So, and probably if you're an aspiring author, you're not rich. So let's find out if we should spend money on that. Okay, short word For a short word about Stephen King for someone who is in a tank, as we say it in the Russian language, because I think highly likely you know who Stephen King is. It's like very likely. Stephen King is basically everywhere. He's literally behind every bush. If you didn't read his books, probably you watched the movies based on his books. If you didn't watch the movies based on his books, probably you saw him somewhere giving interviews, maybe with some other favorite authors of yours. For example, George Martin. A lot of people know the Game of Thrones. There is a famous video that was filmed, or an interview between George Martin and Stephen King, in which they discuss their different ways of working on a book. That is funny. You can also watch that. If you didn't watch that, probably you saw Stephen King being active on Twitter, and sometimes it really feels like that Stephen King knows more about you than you know about you. And yeah, he's literally behind every bush. Yeah, that's the guy. But if we say generally, he's the king. Lucky bastard, my friend once said. He's a really lucky bastard, name-wise. Stephen King, the king of horror stories. And also my colleague, why I want to call her colleague, a person who attends the writing group with me, she said, yeah, he's a trashy author. She said that. I don't say that, so this is her opinion. But the book is very good. I was like, okay, cool. Let's give it a try then. And the big question is Stephen King the right person to teach us to write? Maybe this book is just mansplaining on how many pages? 383 pages. Who knows? And you would say, yes, of course, because he has written so many bestsellers. And nobody wants to write for a drawer, unless you're an Emily Dickinson. And this guy can give you good advice how to earn money on your craft and how to start crafting. But also you must understand that he is an old school guy, although he's not a Republican, thanks God. As an old school guy, he might not understand how the real literary world works. And that means that if you don't create books that can blow up on TikTok, that can be difficult to earn some money with your literature. And it doesn't mean that your work is bad. It's just the age of clip thinking. What are you going to get if you buy this book? First of all, you are going to get a bit of King's biography. So this is one thing, King's biography. I don't know if you're interested in it. Maybe if you are not a King's fan, you're not that interested in it. But yeah, it helps to be absorbed into the story, to, understand where he's coming from and how he became an author. Because, yeah, there were times, of course, for every author when they were unpopular, when they got rejections, etc., etc. And for example, there is information how he collected rejection slips, and how he was talking about, yeah, first of all, he just got rejection slips, and then they were becoming more and more personal. So he even got advice, some recommendations, and then finally he was published. So that's the story. And what you will also get, a chunk which is called Toolbox, and it includes what you need to put a text up, like to put a text together. So grammar, vocabulary, etc., etc. What this mechanical stuff, like the writing mechanics. Then it's going to be exactly on writing, the main part of the book, and also for me the best part of the book, in which he shares his opinion what you should do to start writing. Well, basically you don't need anything to do to start writing, but it's also like how to interact with agents, how to do this, how to do that. So this is the main part, the best part. After, on writing follows with the part which is called on leaving, maybe, or something like this. And on leaving is about the car accident, a very mean car accident that turned his life upside down, and it exactly happened while he was writing this book. So it's also important. I also like this part. Then there is something that I don't want to call exactly rubbish, but for me it was okay. I'll talk about that. So there are lists of books and longer lists of books because the book was republished, and also interviews with his sons, and I will also talk about that a bit later. Also, you will find a part in which he shows the example of edits, and he is editing 1408. He doesn't call it 1408 yet. Well, he calls it, but I think by that moment it wasn't published yet. It's a short story, a film based on it. As always, I read it. I didn't find it too special, but yeah, I also have my tastes. I don't know, maybe you're a fan of 1408. It's also okay. Let's divide the next part of my video into 3 parts. I will be talking about the things that I really liked about this book. The things that... yes, but... Jein. I love this German word. Jein. Yes, but... And the third part, what I strongly disliked about this book. Okay, let's see what we have here. Since I'm a teacher, I like giving the positive feedback first to traumatize, like to make the traumatic effect more noticeable, you know. That's why let's start with something that I really liked about the book. And of course, we cannot argue that Stephen King doesn't know what he's doing. He knows very well. He is an author. He is an author. He is an author whose vocation is being an author. His craft, he knows his craft. He knows his job. Let's say job. Of course, writing and being an author, calling it a job, I don't know. Sometimes when I want to call it a job, there is some unpleasant feeling somewhere in the chest, which is hard to explain. So he knows his job. The next thing that I really liked on writing, like the part which is on writing, is generally rather yes than no. I think he put his soul into this part. I would say so. But what we should also understand, so this is the book. And on writing, this is on writing. So this is something else, this is something else. On writing is this part of the book. You can judge if it is a lot or if it's not a lot for on writing. But he says that it's a very brief book with which you learn writing. So, well, we cannot blame Stephen King for this because he's honest. He says that it's a brief book, it's a short book. There are several points I agree with. For example, the point that to be a writer, you need to read a lot and write a lot. It's very simple. Another advantage, actually, it's written in a very simple way. I've just remembered it. I haven't written it down. Yes, so to write, you need to read a lot and to write a lot. And this is true. You cannot be an author, or there is a quote, you cannot hope to sweep someone else away by the force of your writing until it has been done to you. if you had experienced that, maybe you can also do that. I totally agree with that. I already mentioned that in the very, very old video, why I write. And yeah, I don't really know authors who didn't read, who didn't enjoy reading since childhood or later into their life. And it's logical. If you want to create a book, there should be a reason. Probably you know, you like the process of holding a book in your hands. What an awkward phrase I have built. Okay, another point I really liked is that even when no one is listening or reading or watching, every outing as a bravura, I hope I pronounced it correctly, a performance, because you as the creator are happy. And I think this is true. This is something that I'm trying to achieve while trying to stop being overachiever, overworker. The ultimate thing of me being an author, a writer, my pleasure, my enjoyment, because you can never know if anyone is going to read your books. That would be cool, but you can never know. However, I'll talk about that later. Stephen King contradicts himself. He gives these points, but I'm not sure he follows them himself, if you know what I mean. The next point I also liked. Stephen King wants his characters to live their own life. I hope you understand what is meant by this phrase. Maybe it sounds a bit awkward, but generally, once I watched a video in which a creator was giving an example of Alexander Pushkin. Alexander Pushkin is a Russian author, and he wrote in a letter to his friend that, Tatiana, you can't imagine what my Tatiana has done. So he is writing like he didn't know what is going to happen to Tatiana, the character of the poem Yevgeny Onegin. If you read that, that's cool. It's very interesting. I think it's really still up to date. You can read it if you want to. I feel like Pushkin is not that popular abroad as he is in Russia, but you can give it a try, of course. Maybe it's also the problem of the translation. Poetry is more difficult to translate. But you know, the funny thing is about this example that it was told in comparison to Stephen King. Like the creator was saying that Stephen King, unfortunately, doesn't do that. Okay, let's go. Let's continue. The recommendation from the book that I personally noted to myself is to trust your reader, and if I have to tell you, I lose. A reader must draw the conclusion. You can help the reader to get information from the surrounding, from the picture, and I find it really, really good advice. I really feel like that it's a very useful thing to know. And I think it seems obvious, but sometimes it's like, oh, maybe I should give more detail, maybe I should explain and over-explain. But Stephen King suggests taking it for granted that the reader is intelligent, that the reader can, understand from the surrounding, the plot surrounding. And the last but not least, the concept of how he writes, writing with the door shut, then writing with the door open, in which first he suggests writing only with the door shut without sharing this with the world. After you finish the book, Stephen King's suggestion is to put it to rest, and I think it's clear. I think many authors recommend that, and Stephen King calls it kill my darlings, kill your darlings. I think it's not even his quote. When you give it a bit of a rest, you can look at it a bit distantly, because when you have just finished it, you probably feel like you're a genius. But when some time passed, you start realizing, like, yeah, well, there are many things that can be removed, that can be corrected or replaced, etc., etc. And only after that, you open the door and give this copy of your book to a so-called ideal reader, the first reader, which is very nice to have. Like, I struggle so far. But okay, we'll see about that. There are some things that are not exactly no, but also they're like 50-50, they're dubious, and I'm like, yeah, yes, but. So this is the part about them. And the first of all, we must understand that Stephen King is very opinionated. And don't worship anyone. Read, if you feel like reading his book, this particular book, read it critically. Don't take it as father's advice or like God's advice or like anything else. He can make mistakes, and he does make a lot of mistakes, like in his job, because like it's a job for him. It's my personal opinion, at least I believe so. There are quotes which are like, okay, what do you even mean by them? For example, if you are a bad writer, no one can help you become a good one. Okay, yes, but yeah, of course, it's questionable what it means to be a good writer, because many writers, they have their own audience, and some people might believe that TikTok authors are not authors at all, and some people might believe that if you don't read classics, that means that you don't read at all, etc., etc. Okay, yeah, but the second part, if you are good and want to be great, forget about it. I don't know, like, it's really like, on the one hand, I probably understand what he means, but on the other hand, like, why is it so, direct? Why is it so something that you cannot appeal? Like, very, very strict. Something unchangeable. But we are talking about creativity. It's something like a flow. And also being great is something that is like very, very personal. So I really, I don't know, I guess maybe I just don't match Stephen King, like, in his opinion. Like, for me, it's just like, hey, what do you mean by that? Another quote. What could be more encouraging to the struggling writer than to realize her work is unquestionably better than that of someone who actually got paid for her stuff? Again, I understand what he means. Probably it might boost your confidence if you see books like this, pulp fiction books, so to say, or now we have this rather book talk books, for example, but it also doesn't mean that it's a low quality book. And yeah, technically, when you see a lot of trash on bookshelves in bookstores, it might boost your confidence, but also you can dig yourself such a deep of a grave by thinking that what's wrong with me, the world is wrong, everything is unfair, I'm going to die without being ever published because the world is against me and against people like me. And you also start thinking like, oh, maybe I'm so great and it's just not the right time for me, or no, I'm such a worm and I will never deserve anything better than I have. The principle of mental health awareness of these days: don't compare yourself to others. Likely, it won't help. If I make videos on YouTube and if I see that a lot of trash content gains popularity and has viewers and I have few viewers, it doesn't help me. It doesn't help me at all. I don't know, maybe it helps you, but I would rather not recommend to, get attached, like to be too dependent on this, like boosting your confidence like this. Another thing, which is also like, I can relate to that, Stephen King is obviously an overworker. Hard worker and overworker. I'm also an overworker, and he is inspired by people who created a lot of texts, and it's also like something that was typical for Leo Tolstoy, who I'm going to bring up very, very soon, but maybe in the next season of my videos, okay? And yeah, I feel like sometimes writing, despite everything is good, but also at the same time, sometimes squeezing something that is just not there for this or that reason at this moment can lead you to a burnout. And maybe be gentle to yourself. It doesn't mean that you have to write every day. If you don't have such an opportunity, a privilege or anything, again, it doesn't make you a bad author. The last dubious thing I found, once he got a recommendation with a formula, like he got this rejection slip, and there an editor gave him the formula that he is using up till up to date. And this formula is the second draft equates one first draft minus 10% of your first draft. Yeah, I think that's the problem with Stephen King. It feels like, very square, very, very strict. I feel like the craft doesn't have to be like this because all your books will look the same. Again, this is my opinion. Maybe you're a fan of Stephen King. The main thing that books needs to bring joy into your life. So we're good, okay? The things that I disliked in this book, there are actually really many. Because, yeah, I think if I had been his fan, I used to be his fan when I was smaller, when I was a teenager, I would have devoured this book and I would have admired Stephen King just for him being Stephen King. But for me, the person who also writes, who tries to learn more ways of writing, like, better, and also reading different literature, like various literature, it's just not enough anymore. And it's something that could have seemed a positive thing doesn't seem to be like this anymore. And my general problem is that he is, again, very opinionated, and the way he speaks is that you have to do this, otherwise it's going to be bad. Otherwise it's going to be Pulp Fiction. Like he addresses to Pulp Fiction, although again, like, literature exists for your happiness. If you want to read Pulp Fiction, whatever. And also, I think for many people, as a person from my group said, like, he's a trashy author, so this is really her opinion. And like on the shelves of airports you can also find like loads of books by Stephen King, so many people probably consider them pulp fiction, I don't know. And these, like, you know, a lot of recommendations, if he put them from the point of view of like, I believe so, it worked for me like this, so it might work for you too. Like, I believe, yeah, that could be good advice. I learned that it doesn't work well because. But it's not like that. For example, he's saying, get rid of all the adverbs. Yeah, I also seen, but get rid of all the adverbs. Kill your darlings. Like, okay, but why? What? I don't know. It just, when you sit to write, you need to, you know, let it flow creatively. And also when you edit. But if you start fixing, like, get rid of all adverbs, personally my brain would click and I would have a panic attack, probably. I don't know, if I start thinking, okay, get rid of all the adverbs, and also the passive voice. I don't know what's the problem. Like, I'm a non-native. I really like passive voice because in my native language, which is Russian, passive voice doesn't exist. And I really see magic behind the passive voice. Yes, it makes the sentence heavier. But it's also a tool. I don't know. That's my problem. Like, the restricted nature of this of his recommendations. Also, for example, using said, there is nothing in a dialogue than the word said. But there are also like different situations, and for me it's like he presents a template how to create a text, and it's probably good for a beginner, but we don't want to be the second Stephen King, as I had wanted to be when I was a teenager. I don't know. For me, like, I don't want to write as a template. I don't know, maybe you have a different opinion. Maybe you saw these recommendations from a different perspective. I'm interested in different opinions. But for me, it was like, it's like this, and it cannot be any different way, although there are loads of different other ways. Another thing, like, sometimes once he gave an example of a bad dialogue. It's a dialogue from a Lovecraft's book. I didn't read him much, and I read this dialogue, and it seemed like, yeah, well, maybe there is something wrong, but you need to think like deep. You need to think deeply to understand what's exactly wrong with this passage. And Stephen King says, it's hard to grasp what exactly wrong with it. And I thought, like, but you're a teacher here. Like, don't know. I guess if we take it as a manual, you need to explain to us, like, what exactly wrong with this dialogue. Don't know. Maybe I'm not the queen of dialogues myself. That can also be. Another thing is outdated information. I think information about finding an agent, you have more chances like Googling it or like searching it on YouTube. There are wonderful creators who went through query process and they share their experience, and they do it much better than Stephen King, and they do it in the present time. And like this, you have more chances also not to fall into depression, because, for example, Stephen King, like, he puts this, puts forward the like idea that being published in some journals or magazines can help you to find an agent, but it's not the age of journals, of magazines. They die out. So this is it. Like social media and so, but he's not like, you know, because he is the author, like whose prime years were like later in the past. The last but not least things I had already mentioned, contradiction. Like some thoughts are good, but I think he doesn't really follow his own recommendations. Maybe somewhere at the back of his head he realizes that this is what it is supposed to be, but he doesn't do that. And I think also earning money, he says that it doesn't matter for him, but I think it's also, it's an important part of his doing this, because otherwise, like, he wouldn't have to do that every day, like in such a strict routine, because otherwise what for? To write like 1,000 books in your lifetime, to like, what for? Otherwise, yeah, I don't know, I don't understand that. And two more things, book lists or playlists. And okay, we will forgive him for that because it's a book that was originally published in 2100. We won't forgive though like someone who is like Matt Haig, because it's already modern. And suggestions are welcome, but it could be an Instagram post, you know? Could be just an Instagram post. You don't need to print it out and put it into the book for it to be thicker. And also, you don't need to republish the book with your son's interviews, because personally, I don't know, I don't really care about his sons. It's a bad thing to say, like, I don't really care. I think like interviews with his sons, like, there is no revelation in these interviews. There is nothing that you could learn as an aspiring author. Yeah, I think it's already going to be a bundle of a video. It's going to be long. I try to, you know, sort it out for me to have like the key points. And my conclusion is that if we talk about like how to write a bestseller, I would have called this book How to Write a Bestseller. You can maybe find something interesting on this book, but I think many ideas described in this book already exist on the internet. Many parts of this book already exist on the internet, like everybody knows what his routine is, his writing routine. You can also watch like loads of videos about that. And if you really want to get this book, maybe you can try to find an older version without like, you know, this forward on Joy and the like interviews with his sons. But I wouldn't say that you would save money. I didn't see books cheaper than 10 euro, and they were like over 20. So I don't know. The decision is yours to make. Oh, okay. I'm glad I spoke a bit of English. I did the thing I loved. I also wrote a bit today, and it brings me joy to do these things when now I have a job, and the things that I truly, truly love are those. And I hope you also enjoyed this video. I hope I didn't look depressed as in the previous video. And if you have something to share, if you have your own opinion made on this book, I would be happy to read it without insults, because the diarrhea curse still exists on this channel. And yeah, I think I will be wishing you a wonderful whatever you're having right now. I will be sending you love, 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 and peace, peace from Anna in Germany. They'll be saying tschüss.